The hallway smelled like floor wax and cheap perfume when it happened. Just after the bell. The sound of it tore through Lincoln High like a battle cry. Lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked, laughter echoed off the walls. It was the kind of noise that swallowed quiet people whole. And right in the middle of it all walked Nia Carter, the new girl, shoulders hunched, eyes down, clutching her backpack like a shield. She moved like she was hoping to vanish, just another shadow in the chaos. But silence always draws attention. And that morning, silence drew predators. Brittany and her crew ruled that hallway. Their laughter came before they did, loud, sharp, glittering with cruelty. Brittany's heels clicked like gunfire as she stopped right in front of Nia, blocking her path. "Well, well," she said, eyes flicking up and down Nia's thrift store jeans. "Look who's too good to say hi." The others snickered. Nia smiled politely, a tiny curve of the lips that said she didn't want trouble. "Hey," she whispered, voice barely there. But Brittany wasn't after peace. She wanted a show. She leaned closer, her perfume thick and sweet. "You lost, new girl?" The question wasn't really a question. It was bait. The laughter that followed was sharp, cruel, echoing through the corridor. Nia shook her head softly. "No, I'm fine," she said, her voice calm, even. But Brittany's smile curved into something darker. "Let's make sure you're fine." She shoved Nia's shoulder, not hard enough to injure, but just enough to humiliate. Nia stumbled back. Her books spilled across the floor, papers fluttering like broken wings. The hallway roared with laughter. Someone whistled. Someone else filmed. Tyler, the basketball captain, tall and smug in his Letterman jacket, saw the moment and smirked. "Careful, new girl," he said. "Wouldn't want you to mess up your first week." Then, just as Nia reached down to gather her things, his foot shot out. She tripped. The world slowed. The sound of her body hitting the tile floor echoed through the hallway. For a second, there was silence. Then laughter, loud, raw, merciless. Nia stayed down for a moment, palms burning, knees scraped. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stared at the ground, breathing slow, steady. And when she finally lifted her head, her eyes found Brittany's. They were calm. Steady. The kind of calm that made people nervous. Brittany's smirk faltered just a little, a flicker of something she didn't understand moving across her face. Because there was something in that look, a strength that didn't belong to someone who got knocked down and stayed there. But Nia didn't say a word. She gathered her books, one page at a time, the laughter still echoing above her. Someone whispered, "She's weird." Someone else said, "She's soft." But when Nia stood, her posture was straight. Her chin lifted. She looked at the crowd that had just laughed at her, and didn't flinch. She just turned, brushed the dust off her jeans, and walked away. And the strangest thing happened in that silence after she left. The laughter didn't feel as fun anymore. Even Tyler, still leaning against the lockers, frowned a little. There was something about the way she'd looked back at them. Not angry. Not afraid. Just controlled. Like she'd seen worse. Like this was nothing. Nobody knew that the quiet girl from Atlanta had once worn a gold medal around her neck. Nobody knew she had spent half her life in a dojo, training before sunrise, competing in tournaments across Georgia. Nobody knew that her picture still hung on a wall in a small gym, the youngest state karate champion in her division. She had walked away from all that 2 years ago. After her father's accident, she'd promised her mother she'd never fight again. She'd left that part of herself behind. But something about Lincoln High, about the cruelty that morning, stirred the dust on that buried promise. She felt it as she walked away, the tightness in her chest, the heat behind her calm eyes. She didn't want to be the fighter anymore. She wanted peace. But peace isn't always given to those who seek it. At lunch, whispers followed her. "That's the new girl. She fell in the hall. Brittany really got her." Nia ate alone. Every sound around her, laughter, trays clattering, reminded her of the hallway. Yet she stayed still, every movement careful. She had learned control long before she learned fear. When the final bell rang, she took the long way home, walking past the empty field where the air smelled of wet grass. The noise of the school faded behind her, replaced by the quiet hum of her thoughts. She remembered the years of discipline, The long hours training barefoot on cold floors, her father cheering from the sidelines, his voice proud and steady. And now, all she wanted was to start over, quietly, peacefully. But that night, lying in bed, the laughter came back. It replayed in her head like a cruel echo. She saw the faces, the phones, the smirks. She clenched her fists beneath the covers, then forced them open. Breathe, she told herself. Her father used to say that. Control your breath, and you control your world. The next morning, when she walked into school, the hallway noise washed over her again. Brittany passed her near the lockers and smirked. "Morning, new girl," she said, a little louder than necessary. Tyler laughed. Nia didn't look at them. Didn't answer. She just kept walking. Her silence, somehow, was louder than their words. A teacher nearby glanced over, noticed the tension, then looked away. That was the thing about Lincoln High. Nobody wanted to get involved. It was easier to pretend not to see. But one person did notice, a janitor sweeping near the doors. An older man, with kind eyes and a slow rhythm to his broom. He watched Nia, watched the bullies, and sighed. When she passed, he said quietly, "Keep your head up, young lady. Don't let him see you're hurt." She paused, met his eyes, and nodded. Just a small gesture, but it carried something, a spark of respect between two people who knew what it meant to be invisible. By the end of the day, the story had already changed. Some said Nia cried. Others said she cursed Brittany under her breath. The truth didn't matter, only the whispers did. That's how high school worked. But that night, as Nia stood in front of her mirror brushing her braids, she caught her reflection, the faint bruise on her knee, the calm in her eyes. She studied herself the way a fighter studies an opponent. Then she smiled faintly, not with pride, not with anger, but with a quiet knowing. Because deep down, she understood something the others didn't. Strength isn't proven in the moment you fall. It's proven in the way you rise. And though they didn't know it yet, Lincoln High had just pushed the wrong girl down. She turned off the light, whispering a small prayer under her breath. Tomorrow would come. The bullies would come. But she wasn't afraid. She had faced worse than laughter. And somewhere deep inside her, the fighter, the champion, was still breathing. Waiting. The crowd might have thought they saw a victim that day. But what they really saw was the calm before the storm. By the time the week ended, Lincoln High had made Nia Carter its favorite target. The quiet girl with the calm eyes had become a name whispered between laughs, a face passed around in videos. The hallway fall had turned into a joke, one they replayed again and again on phones under cafeteria tables. Every time she walked past, someone mimicked the way she'd tripped, the way her books had scattered. It was cruel. It was childish. But most of all, it was constant. Every day felt like a test she hadn't signed up for. At lunch, Brittany and her friends would slide past her table and, accidentally, spill juice across her tray. "Oops," they'd say, smirking. In gym class, someone would hide her shoes. Sometimes she'd open her locker and find paper stuffed inside, nasty words scribbled across them in marker: loser, mute, weak. She never reacted. She just cleaned it up, closed the door, and kept moving. That silence, that unshakable calm, made them angrier. Tyler, always playing the tough guy, started filming little moments. He'd hold up his phone, smirking, as Brittany sneered at her. "Let's get another one for the group chat," he'd say. "Come on, say something, new girl." But she never did. And somehow, that hurt them more than any insult could. Because nothing unsettles bullies like a person who refuses to break. Still, silence is heavy. It starts to crush you if you carry it too long. At home, Nia's mother could see the weight she was holding. "Baby, you're too quiet," she said one evening over dinner, her voice soft but worried. Nia forced a smile. "It's just school." Her mother looked at her, eyes tired from double shifts at the hospital, and reached across the table. "I know it's hard starting over. But remember what your father used to say, real strength doesn't need an audience." Nia nodded, but inside, her heart ached. Because that phrase, real strength, used to mean something different. It used to mean focus, movement, pride. Now it meant enduring pain in silence. That night, after her mom fell asleep, Nia opened her closet. At the bottom sat a small wooden box. She hadn't opened it since they left Atlanta. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside lay her old karate uniform, white, slightly yellowed with age, the belt folded neatly on top. The smell of chalk and leather hit her like a memory. She ran her fingers over the patches sewn near the chest, her name, the small Georgia flag, the worn gold edges from years of use. For a moment, she saw herself again, younger, barefoot, standing in a ring, her father cheering from the sidelines. He'd been her biggest fan. Every morning before sunrise, he'd drive her to practice, humming gospel tunes while she dozed in the passenger seat. "Discipline first," he used to say. "Power later." Then one rainy night, the accident took him away, and Nia had never stepped on a mat again. She'd promised herself she'd never fight, not without him watching. But that promise had turned into a cage. Every insult at school, every cruel laugh, pressed harder against her chest until she could barely breathe. She looked at the uniform again, her reflection trembling in the mirror. "He wouldn't want this," she whispered. "He wouldn't want me hiding." She tied her braids tighter, standing taller, her heartbeat steadying with every breath. For the first time in months, she felt her pulse slow, the same calm she used to feel before a match. The next morning, the sun was still rising when she laced her sneakers and stood in her backyard. The grass was wet, the air sharp. She took her stance, left foot forward, fists loose, and began moving through old forms, one by one. Her body remembered before her mind did. A strike. A block. A pivot. The sound of her breath cutting through the quiet. It wasn't anger she felt. It was release. By the time the school bus pulled up, she was calm again, centered. The fighter wasn't gone. She had just been sleeping. When she walked into school that day, there was something different about her. Her shoulders didn't curve inward anymore. Her eyes didn't drop. She moved with quiet purpose. Brittany noticed first. "Oh, look who finally decided to join us again," she said near the lockers, her voice dripping sarcasm. But Nia just smiled faintly, brushed past her, and said, "Good morning." That threw Brittany off. Nobody had ever answered her like that before, polite, calm, and utterly fearless. By lunch, the Bullies were planning something new. "We should do it during gym," Tyler said, scrolling through his phone. "Get her in front of everyone. Make it big." Brittany grinned. "Yeah. If she wants to act tough, let's see what she's got." The others laughed. They wanted a reaction. They wanted to break the quiet girl. When gym class rolled around, Nia could feel it in the air, the tension, the whispering. Everyone was watching her, waiting for something to happen. The coach blew the whistle. "Partner drills," he called out. Brittany grinned and walked straight toward Nia. "Guess we're partners, new girl." It wasn't a request. The drill started simple: footwork, balance, controlled movements. But Brittany didn't follow the rules. She shoved harder, moved faster, making it clear she wanted a scene. "Come on, new girl," she hissed. "You gonna cry again?" Nia said nothing. Her jaw tightened, but her stance stayed solid. Brittany shoved again. "Fight back," she taunted. Tyler, from across the room, had his phone ready. "This is gonna be gold," he whispered to his friend. And still, Nia didn't move. Her calm unnerved Brittany. "You think you're better than me," she snapped. No answer. Just that same steady breathing. That same unbreakable stillness. For a split second, Brittany saw something in Nia's eyes that made her pause. Not fear, not submission, but patience. The kind of patience that meant, "I'm giving you a chance to stop." But Brittany didn't stop. She laughed instead. "You're so weird," she said, pushing Nia one last time, harder than before. Nia stumbled but caught herself easily. Her balance was perfect. Her calm never cracked. She turned slowly, meeting Brittany's gaze, and for the first time, her voice wasn't soft. "You really don't want to do this," she said quietly. The room went silent. Even the squeak of sneakers on the gym floor seemed to fade. Brittany blinked, startled by the tone, not angry, not scared, just absolute certainty. "Oh yeah," Brittany sneered, trying to recover. "And what if I do?" Nia looked around, at the watching crowd, at the phone cameras, at the coach distracted by a whistle from the other side of the gym. Then she looked back at Brittany and took a deep breath. The kind of breath her father had taught her before every fight. The kind that meant it was time. That night, as she stood before her mirror again, the reflection staring back wasn't just the new girl anymore. It was someone who had remembered who she was. She tied her braids tighter, her voice calm as she whispered, "No more hiding." The next day would bring the moment she'd been avoiding. The gym. The crowd. The humiliation they planned for her. But what they didn't know, what none of them could ever imagine, was that the quiet girl they'd been mocking for weeks was about to show them what true power looks like. Not loud. Not cruel. Just unstoppable. The air inside the gym felt heavy that day, like everyone knew something was about to happen. The noise, the sneakers squeaking, the laughter, it all blended into that restless hum that always comes before a storm. Brittany stood near the bleachers, twirling a strand of her hair, whispering plans to her crew. "When I shove her, make sure you're filming," she said, glancing at Tyler. He lifted his phone, smirking. Already rolling. On the other side of the gym, Nia tied her sneakers tighter. Her heartbeat was calm. Her breaths were slow. The world around her moved in slow motion, the bouncing basketballs, the echo of voices, the sharp whistle of the coach. Every sound seemed distant, like she was underwater. She had already made her decision. She wasn't going to run anymore. When the coach called for partner drills, the crowd stirred. Everyone knew what was coming. Brittany strutted across the gym floor, her smirk loud enough for the whole class to hear. "Guess it's you and me again, new girl," she said, grabbing a mat. Nia nodded once, no expression, no fear. The students gathered around casually, pretending to tie their shoes or check their phones, but everyone was watching. Brittany started the drill by circling her. "So, what do I do?" she said loudly, mocking. "Is this where you fall?" A few people laughed. Nia didn't respond. Her eyes were steady, focused. "Come on," Brittany pressed, shoving her shoulder. "Do something." The first push didn't move her. The second one barely did. The laughter faded slightly. Brittany's smile twitched. "What, you scared?" Nia looked up, finally meeting her eyes. "No," she said quietly. "Just tired." Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was calm, too calm. Something about it made Brittany hesitate. "What's that supposed to mean?" she snapped, shoving her again, harder this time. And then it happened. One moment Brittany's hand hit Nia's shoulder. The next, she was on the mat, staring up at the ceiling. The crowd gasped. No one even saw how it happened. Nia had moved so fast, it looked like she'd barely touched her. One twist. One pivot. Total control. The laughter stopped. The air went still. Even the coach froze, whistle half raised. Brittany's face went red as she scrambled up. You got lucky," she stammered. "Try that again." She lunged forward. Nia didn't flinch. She sidestepped, spun, and in one fluid motion, pinned Brittany's arm behind her back, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to make her stop. Brittany gasped, shocked, realizing she couldn't move. "Let go," she shouted. Nia looked down at her, eyes calm as ever. "I don't want to hurt you," she said softly. Her voice wasn't cold. It wasn't cruel. It was steady, like she was speaking from somewhere deeper than anger. The room stayed silent. Tyler's phone, still recording, trembled in his hand. He whispered, What was that?" Someone else muttered, "She's like, trained or something." Nia released Brittany's arm and stepped back. She bowed slightly, a small gesture of respect that seemed completely out of place in that noisy gym. Brittany stared at her, stunned, face burning with humiliation. "You think this is funny?" she hissed. "You trying to make me look stupid?" Nia shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm trying to stop this before you do something you regret." Her words hit harder than any punch. The crowd didn't laugh. They just watched. Tyler lowered his phone slowly. The coach finally stepped forward. "That's enough," he said. "Both of you back to—" He stopped mid-sentence, eyes narrowing at Nia's stance. "Wait a minute," he murmured. "That form, that control." He took a step closer. "Carter, are you—" "Nia Carter." The whisper spread fast. "Carter, like, the fighter." No way. That's her. Brittany blinked, confused. What's he talking about? The coach's eyes widened. Georgia state champion, he said quietly, almost to himself. I remember you. You were on ESPN. You won the finals at 16. The crowd gasped. Heads turned. Suddenly, it all clicked. The calm, the balance, the quiet power. The videos they'd seen online years ago of a girl in a white GI bowing after a flawless match, that was her. The same girl they'd tripped, mocked, humiliated. Brittany's face went pale. She looked at Nia like she was seeing her for the first time. Tyler turned off his phone, his hand shaking. Yo, he whispered to his friend. We messed up. Bad. Nia didn't gloat, didn't smile. She just stood there, still breathing evenly, eyes soft but strong. I'm not here to fight, she said. I just wanted to be left alone. For a long moment, no one spoke. The gym was completely silent. Even the sound of the basketballs bouncing in the other court had stopped. Everyone just stared, not out of fear, but out of awe. The same girl they thought was weak had just shown them a kind of strength none of them understood. Brittany stood frozen, her pride shattered. She wanted to yell, to say something cruel, but no words came. Because deep down, she knew, this wasn't someone she could break. This wasn't someone she could touch. Finally, Nia turned to leave the mat. But before she walked away, she paused and looked back at Brittany. Her voice was quiet, almost tender. That, she said, was mercy. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything that had been said in that school before. She walked toward the locker room, the crowd parting silently as she passed. No one dared whisper. No one dared laugh. Tyler, still holding his phone, looked down at the screen. The video had captured everything, the speed, the control, the silence afterward. He knew it would spread. He knew people would talk. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a game. It felt like truth. As Nia disappeared through the locker room doors, the coach let out a slow breath. You all just saw what discipline looks like, he said quietly. Remember it. Brittany stood still, eyes wide, face flushed with shame. Her friends drifted away one by one, avoiding her gaze. For the first time, she felt what Nia had felt, the sting of silence, the weight of everyone watching. Only now, the laughter was gone. There was just respect. And somewhere deep inside that quiet gym, something shifted. The balance. The energy. The story. It wasn't the new girl anymore. It was the girl who stood tall when everyone else tried to tear her down. The one who reminded them all that power doesn't need to shout. As she left that day, the hallway didn't feel so loud anymore. The same people who once mocked her now moved aside when she passed. Nobody said a word. But every pair of eyes that followed her told the same story, the story of the moment everything changed. And while the world would soon see the video, the real transformation had already happened. Not in the crowd, not on the phones, but in the silence that followed her bow. Because in that silence, everyone learned something they'd forgotten. True strength never humiliates. It humbles. The video spread faster than anyone expected. By lunch, every phone in the school had it. The slow-motion clip of Brittany charging, the blur of movement, the stunned silence as she hit the mat. Someone added dramatic music. Someone else slowed it down and captioned it, "Never underestimate quiet strength." By the time Nia walked into the cafeteria, whispers followed her like shadows. People who used to look through her now stared. Not with mockery, with curiosity. With something close to respect. She could feel their eyes on her back, but she kept walking, tray steady in her hands. She'd been invisible yesterday. Now she was the story everyone wanted to tell. At her usual empty table near the window, she sat quietly, unfolding her sandwich. Her fingers were calm, but her chest felt heavy. She didn't like this kind of attention. To her, what happened in the gym wasn't about winning. It was about stopping something ugly before it got worse. But the internet didn't care about nuance. It only saw spectacle. From the other side of the cafeteria, Brittany sat with her head low. Her once loud table was now eerily quiet. Even her closest friends avoided eye contact. Tyler scrolled through his phone, guilt crawling across his face. "It's at 40,000 views already," he whispered. Someone posted it on TikTok. Brittany clenched her fists. "Turn it off," she hissed. "Delete it." "I can't," he said. "It's everywhere now." She stared down at her untouched food. The girl who once ruled that cafeteria couldn't even lift her head. For the first time, she knew what it felt like to be the target of whispers. Across the room, Nia's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. That was beautiful. "Dad." She froze. Her breath caught for just a second. Her father hadn't messaged her in months. Since the accident. Since everything fell apart. Her eyes softened, and for the first time that day, she smiled faintly. She didn't reply, she couldn't yet, but something warm flickered in her chest. At that same moment, a familiar voice broke through the noise. "Mind if I sit here?" She looked up. It was a boy she'd seen a few times. Quiet, tall, thoughtful eyes. His name was Elijah. He wasn't part of Brittany's group. He wasn't loud. But he was kind, the kind of person who noticed things others didn't. "Sure," Nia said. He set down his tray. "Everyone's talking about you," he said, not as gossip, but as fact. "You know that video's gone viral, right?" She nodded slightly. "Yeah. I wish it hadn't." He tilted his head. "Most people would love the attention." "Most people don't know what it costs," she said quietly. Elijah smiled softly. "You're not like the others, are you?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. After a moment he asked, "So, you really were a champion?" She looked out the window. The sunlight reflected off the glass, soft and golden. "A long time ago," she said. "Before everything changed." "What happened?" Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "My dad was my coach. He taught me everything: control, focus, honor. But after the accident, he couldn't train anymore. I couldn't fight. Not like before." She paused, fingers tracing the edge of her tray. "I left the circuit. I thought if I started over somewhere new, I could just be normal." Elijah watched her carefully. "But you couldn't, could you?" She shook her head. "People don't let quiet girls stay invisible for long." The bell rang, slicing the moment in half. Students began filing out. Brittany's table was the first to clear, her friends slipping away quickly. She stayed behind, eyes locked on Nia. For the first time, there was no anger there, just confusion. Maybe even guilt. Nia gathered her things and stood up. As she passed Brittany's table, their eyes met. Neither spoke. But something unspoken passed between them, something fragile, human. A truce that hadn't yet been declared, but existed all the same. Outside, the autumn wind brushed through the trees. Nia walked alone toward the courtyard, the noise of the school fading behind her. Her thoughts drifted to her father's message again. That was beautiful. She remembered how he used to say that after every match, when she bowed, even in defeat. "Winning isn't the beauty," he'd tell her. "Grace is." And now, standing under the gray sky, she realized he was right. What happened in the gym wasn't victory. It was restraint. Mercy. As she turned to leave, she saw Elijah leaning against the brick wall, waiting. "You walking home?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Yeah." He fell into step beside her. They didn't talk much, just walked. The air smelled of rain. Cars passed. The world moved. But something about the silence between them felt peaceful. When they reached the corner where their paths split, Elijah stopped. "Hey," he said. "For what it's worth, I think what you did in there taught everyone something." Nia tilted her head. "Taught them what?" He smiled. "That being strong doesn't mean being cruel." For a moment, she just looked at him, the words settling deep in her chest. Then she nodded. "Thanks." As he turned to go, she called out, "Elijah." He turned back. She hesitated, then said softly, "People are going to talk. Just don't believe everything you hear about me." He grinned. "I don't listen to noise. I watch people." And with that, he walked away.